So welcome to the 6th episode of the 2nd season of the Surrogate podcast. I'm really excited and pleased to have in the studio today Melissa, who is a surrogate, and Joss, who is a surrogate coordinator at MSJ. Variation in job title might be shared slightly later on in the podcast. We have the task today of talking about a really interesting but specific topic, which is surrogacy and work. And I'm looking forward to delving into this because it's so nuanced to everybody. So before we kick off into the conversation, tell us a little bit more about who you are. Josh, you can give me your proper job title.
Hi everybody. This is my first UK podcast. So thank you, Kay, for having me today. I love talking about anything surrogacy. I have been with MSJ now for 18 months and I am the UK Surrogate Membership Manager. Again, the title does change, but I have the absolute honour to be able to talk to surrogates each and every day just about the fantastic things that they do. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be here today.
And you do it so very, very well, sitting in the chair of the receiving end of that as well as working alongside you. Melissa, tell us a bit more about you.
Hi, I'm Melissa. I'm 32. I'm a one-time surrogate. Baby was born January 25. So, just coming towards the end of my journey, and yeah.
Fab. It's really, really great to be here with you, Melissa, because the last time when we did season 1, you were pregnant, and so it's really nice to see you. I wasn't. Were you about to do embryo transfer?
It was just coming out to embryo transfer. It was coming up to the counselling.
So I was at the beginning of your journey and now you're at the other end of the journey. Yeah.
And now I'm at the very, very end.
Yeah, it's really, really nice to have you back. So surrogacy and work is a funny conversation for me to host because I'm a surrogate and I work for my surrogacy journey. So it's been an interesting kind of pathway for me because a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today in terms of telling your employer and how your employer has been kind of don't apply to my situation. But Joss, from your range of experience now, because you have supported so many surrogate conversations, tell us some of the headline things that surrogacy impacts on in relation to your work.
Okay, so as you said, a real sort of variation, if you like, of situations. And Melissa will talk a little bit more about hers in a bit. But when I talk to surrogates at the very, very beginning of their journey, we have a conversation about what the future holds for them, how they are, going to essentially discuss surrogacy with friends and family, what point they're going to talk about this. And we also talk a lot about work because majority of the time, which is absolutely incredible, the conversation that our surrogates have with people at work is really super positive. People are really inquisitive. People are kind. People are genuinely surprised sometimes because they've never met a surrogate. So we have a bit of a conversation about sort of timelines, which we can go into later about, when is a good time to tell your work and what sort of information you want to give them from a very early sort of stage. So again, with everything, I'm always led by a surrogate and how they feel about a certain situation, because sometimes they feel it's appropriate to talk about the surrogacy really early on in their work. And then sometimes if they feel they may not be as, not supported, but they may not be as understood, right from the beginning, they will leave it until they are a little bit further into the journey to feel comfortable to have those conversations. But generally, it's a mixture of sort of just, positive sort of excitement, but just a bit nervous about how they're going to be received, not only by their sort of boss, if you like, but also the people that they work with as well. Because, let's face it, as we say, you don't meet many other surrogates. So, to have that headline question, oh my gosh, you never met us. What's it like? So it opens a floodgate of conversations, which generally I think surrogates are ready for because they're so proud of what they're doing, which is incredible. They're incredible human beings. You're incredible human beings. And it's a lovely platform, isn't it, to open and start that conversation. So
yeah, you become a default surrogate educator, whether you want to or not, quite frankly, just the bump gives it away. Yes. Thanks, Joss. Melissa, give us a little bit of insight. What at the point you made this decision, what was your work? What decisions did you have to make in that space?
It's quite a tricky one because my journey was very, very quick from the moment I said I want to do it to, now. I had the conversation, and then obviously once I had had a conversation with MSJ and decided to go ahead, I kind of mentioned it to my boss once, and I just said, oh, by the way, I'm going to be a surrogate. And he was like, what? Like, where does it come from? So there was obviously very brief questions, and he asked how it would affect work. And I was like, as far as I'm aware, I get treated like any normal pregnant person. The pregnancy policy is standard for me. I did have a look on my websites, my work websites, policies, could find absolutely nothing to do with a surrogate. However, they do have a policy for surrogate parents, so parents who are having a baby through surrogacy, which is a great step, but not ideal because my boss was obviously communicating with HR to find out what he needed to do. So that initial conversation was fine, and he just said, yeah, just keep me updated. And I said, yeah, well, it'll all be kind of in the new year. And as and when I went to clinic appointments and things like that, I kind of tried to give him as much notice as possible. I think coming up to transfer, obviously there are appointments that are very, very last minute because of obviously aligning periods and things like that. So I did say to him, and had a very, very awkward conversation with my boss about periods, which was so much fun.
The more you talk to them about it, probably the more they're just like, go do your thing, Melissa, whatever you need.
But I was like, look, I'm going to be honest with you from the get-go. There are going to be appointments that I need to take very, very last minute. And I explained it to him in the most standard way possible so I didn't have to go into detail, but also given enough explanation so he didn't have to ask questions. And he was fine with it. I ended up actually taking 2 weeks holiday over the transfer period because I didn't want to be working and stressed, and I wanted it to work basically. So I was like, I'm going on holiday. And then obviously I come back and told him it worked. And yeah, there were conversations. And at the very start, my boss was very supportive, and yeah, it was quite easy conversations, to be honest.
That's amazing. It sounds like you've had a relatively easy journey with your employee
At the beginning,
yeah. I mean, I'll let you talk as much or a little about the rest of it as you want to.
A little bit tricky towards like the third trimester. All through the first and second trimester was pretty straightforward. But being a single parent, I did end up coming off of work sick for the last kind of 4 months of pregnancy.
Okay.
There was a number of factors that I kind of had to take into consideration, and I got counselling through MSJ, and I utilised it so much because I felt I needed validation for taking the time off sick.
Okay.
And I was very, very stressed with my shifts and childcare, being a single parent. And my son's dad had recently had an operation, so he couldn't have.
Because you had some plates spinning there, didn't you?
Oh yeah. There was a lot going on, and there was other things family related that it kind of put me in like a bit of a dark space, and I was really worried about the stress that work and shifts was putting on me and my body. And I had a conversation with a counsellor, and I said, look, I don't want to be not working, but at the same time, this isn't my baby, and I feel like if it was mine, I could deal with the stress and I could put my body under that stress knowing it's my child. It's not my baby. And I didn't want to put my body under the stress. And I spoke in quite a lot of depth with the counsellor, and she was like, you don't need to validate it. At the end of the day, you're doing what you need to do. Like if you feel you're stressed, you need to take that time. And I did. In the end, I took the last couple of months of pregnancy off, and yeah, it was stressful because of the shifts and things like that. It wasn't anything that my manager was against surrogacy or anything. It was genuinely just to do with being a single parent and shift management. And then obviously going back after maternity leave was again a struggle because he couldn't accommodate my shifts. And yeah, kind of, I'm going back now. So we've managed to kind of work it out a little bit, but I don't really know what the future holds.
Thank you. It's really, really interesting to hear, some lived experience of some of those complexities. And I know certainly since I've been working in surrogacy that the landscape has really changed. That used to very much be the way that MSJ talked about our work here in the UK, was changing the landscape, and actually through campaigns like Fertility at Work and some of the other networks that we're part of and have been very involved in, there are advancements happening. Joss, that piece around policies and procedures, when you're talking to a new surrogate, what do you say to them in terms of figuring out this journey with their work and policies and procedures?
Having that open conversation is really important. And again, I can't tell them when the right time to have that is. It really is about, can you have those conversations, or can you find out from someone? And it depends on the workplace. It depends on how big and how structured the company is. But do you have somebody in HR that you can sit with and you can be really honest and open with and just ask about their policies and procedures? Because you don't want to feel that you're treated any differently. You're absolutely right. As a surrogate, it would be fantastic if there were policies and procedures within every workplace for surrogates and intended parents. We know that's not the case. We know that we are trying to change the language that's used in some policies and procedures to make surrogates feel more inclusive, to not necessarily feel like they're having a conversation that's out of the norm. So it's about really support. We talk a lot in MSJ about support and just about, really just making sure the surrogate understands that, they can go into their workplace and be confident. And like you say, they have to be supported by the people that they work with, and by their bosses, and, appointments, they have to be able to go to appointments at the drop of a hat, you're right, and they do have to, they get the same amount of, maternity leave and maternity pay. But sometimes surrogates will come in actually not knowing that and not knowing that they've got those rights.
Absolutely. Surrogates and IPs. So I'm going to talk a little bit about one of the dads that I'm on the journey with, who had been booking annual leave off for all of our antenatal appointments. And I said, just go and check your employees' contacts on this. And I think because they're in the same-sex male relationship, they had kind of assumed the policies aren't going to be in favour for us in terms of antenatal appointments. And then they went back and checked. One of my IPs possibly has the best parental leave, paternity, surrogacy policy out there. He works for a major gaming company, and I can probably say no more on who that is, but it's absolutely fantastic parental leave. And I think, I might be getting this wrong, but I think the company is probably American rooted, and where surrogacy is slightly more advanced. But I think that's possibly, if I'm allowed to just interject a first bit of tidbit kind of advice to anyone listening, is that if you go to your work better pay policy and it doesn't read as surrogacy friendly, don't necessarily assume that is their take. It is more likely that they've never supported surrogacy before. And actually, there's loads of advice and support out there for changing those policies and updating them. Let's talk about a really specific thing we've mentioned a couple of times, but within that, maternity leave. So what is the expectation from surrogates from workplaces in terms of maternity leave? What can surrogates take, Joss?
So again, they get the statutory, it's absolutely within their rights to be able to take the same maternity leave as, if it was your...
Which in the UK is a year.
Yeah, which is a year. So we work with an incredible company, Fertility Matters at Work, and they campaign, for changing policies and procedures, in workplaces, which is incredible. But for us, it's about making sure that surrogates understand they get that, because they are so surprised by it. They're so surprised that they can have it and almost feel like, oh, but can I really, and am I allowed to? And what we talk about a lot is the post-birth, if you like, and the process, the third trimester, the fourth trimester, like you said, is challenging, and it is challenging for surrogates, and it depends on, their lifestyle and the support they had as a single mom. It's difficult being able to take that time post-birth to be able to spend with your family, to be able to sort of recuperate, depending on what birth you've had. Don't feel that you can't use that time. Don't feel that time is not for you because you're a surrogate. And how lovely would it be, you're right, if it actually said that in a policy and procedure, to not make your surrogate have to second guess themselves.
Yeah, and we often don't get our surrogates taking the full maternity leave. I think, I speak from my own experience that I would be sat twiddling my thumbs, not knowing what to do with myself once 3 days afterwards. But also something that I've really noticed, the more deeply I've worked in surrogacy, is that being a surrogate changes your life, not just on the level of the journey itself, but it also is an opportunity after that birth kind of to reflect and have a bit of a kind of like, oh, what next? You know, you're so focused on that. And I know you're a little bit in that space at the moment, Melissa, aren't you? So
A little bit, yeah. I mean, to touch back on what you said with some of the conversations, obviously having your maternity leave, I had a really interesting conversation with a colleague of mine when I was pregnant, and he was like, so you're coming straight back to work after you've given birth? And I was like, no, I'm taking time off, off the seat to recover. It's like, there were only a couple of days, right? And I was like, no, I'll sit. I think I originally said 6 months in total. And he was like, Kim, you shouldn't have that. And I was like, what do you mean? And we ended up having a little bit of a disagreement. And he was
I'd quite like to meet this guy.
he was very much like, yeah, but you don't have a baby. And I'm like, I've still pushed a baby out. My body is still recovering. There are so many hormones and emotions running through my body. You do not want me to be in work. I promise you that.
I like that phrasing. Oh, you don't want me here, Robert.
And I really shut him down, actually. And it was a really odd conversation to have because he was a good friend of mine in work. And I think it was just his opinion, which is fine. And I think he doesn't have children, so I don't think he ever really kind of understands. But it was kind of one of those moments I was like, excuse me? Like, I will take what I want.
There's also an education piece in that, isn't there? That actually sometimes from people's point of view where they don't understand what else happens in the fourth trimester or postnatally. So from my experience for this journey, for example, the entirety of what I'm intending to take for maternity leave, I will be expressing milk, probably for 4 hours a day. Yeah. You know, that is kind of a job in itself. I couldn't do that and realistically go back into the workplace. For some people who have been surrogates, they may have intended to have a vaginal birth and end up having a cesarean section, which then pushes their recovery time, you know. Rushing back to the workplace after such a life-altering journey in your body, and you're so right to mention the hormonal shifts as well. You know, 12 weeks, 14 weeks, 15 weeks after birth, your hormones are not back to the level that they were pre-starting the journey. So we do need that time, and I very, very strongly advocate for it for all surrogates. Joss, talk to us a little bit about juggling work and pregnancy.
So I think, you know, we have a conversation, myself and surrogates throughout, again, the sort of second, third trimester about, okay, how are you feeling and what are the realities of how you're feeling with everyday life, you know, having to juggle, you know, family, having to juggle children, having to juggle, you know, work on top of that. How are you feeling? I'll go back to what we said at the beginning, you know, that support network is really important. You mentioned, Melissa, the support from Lisa, from our counsellor, who is always there throughout a journey as well, to be able to support the surrogates and the intended parents to really talk about those emotions as well. Because you touched on it as well, Melissa, it can be sometimes a different journey of how you're feeling when you've carried your own child, because you're right, there are some things that you just do, you know, when you're carrying your own child, you just do. But I think even though we say you shouldn't put that weight of responsibility on you, I can imagine you still do. So then, some things you think twice about doing. And, you know, maybe sometimes if work is stressful or it is, you know, sort of physically demanding, then you need to take that time to be able to really understand, you know, what you can put yourself through.
This time round, obviously, when I was pregnant with my son, I was pushing trolleys, and I didn't tell anyone for 12 weeks. And I was very much just carrying on doing the job that I was doing. But this time round, I was just so consciously aware of putting strain on my body, especially in the first 12 weeks. I mean, I work in a supermarket, so I'm stacking shelves, and I love doing delivery days. It's my favorite days. But I was like, there were obviously risk assessments put in place, and I was fine. But I was just very conscious of, you know, putting things on the top shelf and carrying heavy things. And I basically just said to my manager, I was like, look, I know I can physically do it, but I don't want to be doing the heavy load stuff. So and he was fine. He took me off of the big drinks, so the big bottles and the alcohol and things like that. And he put me on to the smaller bits, like chocolate sweets, tins and things like that. So that was a lot easier for me. And even then I was still so conscious about how I was lifting, what I was lifting and what I was doing, because I felt like it wasn't my body. It was so strange. it was obviously, but because it wasn't my baby, I wanted to give that baby the best chance in the whole pregnancy.
Yeah, and I think some of those adaptations are really good to talk about. I started sitting on I think all my colleagues have noticed now, I haven't at first, but I've started sitting on and bouncing quite rigorously on a birth ball throughout all of my online meetings, and it's
Popping up a gammy neck.
I am. I try my hardest to stay still and to stop making everyone seasick. But yeah, I mean, that's been a key thing for me. And I think it's useful also, I'd say this to any potential surrogates listening, is to not, if you've had children of your own, don't go from the default of what you did on your maternity journeys at that point. I know with my two that I was working jobs which involved me being out the house and on my feet for 8-9 hours with both my children's pregnancies, and in some ways, I mean, I was a fair bit younger as well, but in some ways that kind of really energized me and kind of kept me going, whereas my job now is very much brain focused, and I've reached a point where by 3 o'clock in the afternoon my brain is just not really working anymore in the same way that it was. And I think I've based my maternity leave on, what I did last time again, rather than what's maybe relevant to kind of recovering and coming back this time. So I think just think about it in terms of really adjusting to what am I going to want to achieve in that time that I take off of work? What do I want to get back into my body? Do I want to start a fitness regime? Do I want to be expressing? What are all these things that I would like to achieve, and then kind of map out how long you take off based on that.
Yeah.
Let's shift the focus. We've spoken a lot about surrogates because we're the Surrogate podcast, so we're very, very biased. But also, let's talk a little bit about intended parents as well. One of the considerations that I would like to bring in when we're talking about intended parents is expenses. Because work and workplace and salary has a bearing on your surrogate expenses. Josh, do you want to just talk to us a little bit about that?
Yes, so at the very beginning, we look and talk to surrogates about expenses. We have a really great way, I think, of sort of looking at the expenses, because surrogates, again, will come in and just be like, I just want to do it all for the intended parents, and it's not a transactional thing, and it's not, and that's fine, and we absolutely support that. There are going to be expenses that surrogates need, because there is going to be a fall in wages, just dependent on, for how long you're out of work, and dependent on what your package is with your workplace. So we try and help surrogates understand that, again, we are here to support through the intended parents, ensuring that the surrogates aren't a sort of negative loss in regards to earnings, because we don't want that to be a stress for a surrogate as well. Everything is expensive, and you don't want to, again, you're coming into this journey with such a kind and open heart. But, the reality is there are certain things that are going to cost money. And if you're not earning as much money as you were when you were working, there has to be a sort of deficit that needs to be
covered. Absolutely.
I worked out my expenses before I met any intended parents. And that for me was a godsend.
That's a really good thing.
It was honestly because I felt like had I had a connection with them and then done my expenses, I would have taken bits out, because I felt like I don't want them to spend all that. I do just want to give them a baby, and I stand by it. And I was very open with them, and I gave them a copy of them, because I was like, look, there's anything that you think that's, not justifiable, then you tell me and we can have a discussion. And they were fine with it. It actually turns out that my expenses were slightly lower than what I had put on my profile, which was great for them. But from the get-go, I had those set in place and done, because I didn't want to have those awkward conversations. And having that conversation with them very, very early on was brilliant, because it was so much easier to deal with in the future.
And I think it speaks to, on a lot of other episodes that we've recorded in this season, we've spoken a lot about, that communication and transparency between surrogates and IPs. And very much when it comes to the workplace, I would encourage that. If work's stressful, if work aren't being as supportive as they need to be, if you need to actually change your mat leave from what you originally said on your retention agreement, if you need a little bit longer off afterwards, like having those really honest communications with your IPs is vital. We're drawing towards a close of the episode. Key takeaways, guys. So if we're talking to our audiences who potentially people are beginning to explore their own surrogacy journeys, what are we saying in terms of work? Key takeaways.
Again, open transparency, using it almost as a platform of education, because the chances are your employer and the people you work with may never have met, I said it again, another surrogate. So use that as an absolutely positive opportunity to talk about surrogacy, to help people understand, and do some, do some digging as well in regards to, gov.com. I've got a great, supportive, educational bits on there. Go to companies who will support you in regards to, out in the norm fertility journey, so that you understand where you're at before you go to a meeting with somebody, and challenge if you don't think the opinion's right. But it should be a positive experience at work. So we're here as well to support any surrogate who doesn't get that positive experience.
Thank you, Joss. Melissa.
You kind of said it all. If you're speaking to your employer, ask them, because I asked my manager if he knew if there was a surrogacy policy. He didn't have a clue. Mm-hmm. And I did some digging myself, and I found the policy for surrogate parents, but not an actual surrogate. Yeah. So in terms of, being a surrogate, you are entitled to anything that any other pregnant woman is. But do your research with your company and look at the policies that they have, and encourage your IPs to do the same, because they do have, we are getting better, but there are companies that do have policies in place for intended parents, and, it is similar to adoptive leave and things like that. There are other, policies out there that I didn't know about. Yeah. It was really interesting reading. So yeah, I think just do your research, and before you make any decisions, speak to HR, and,
don't think that's to ask. That's really, really good advice, and probably would be my key takeaway as well, is don't assume that what you find on first investigation into your workplace policies is actually how it stands, but, grow and learn alongside them, and be the person that paves the way for other people to be on IBF and educate and be on those journeys. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you about surrogacy and work. Thank you both for being here in the studio with us.
Again.
Thank you. If this episode touched you and you'd like to find out more about my surrogacy journey and our completely unique surrogate membership, please head over to our website, www.mysurrogacyjourney.com, or follow us online on Instagram at official My Surrogacy Journey. If you love this episode, then please subscribe to the series, because we're going to have episodes coming out weekly. We can't wait for you to tune in and follow us. Thanks for listening.